All right, welcome back. We are back from break. We are game 2014 in the fall 2020 semester and at George Brown College, and it's Mobile Game Development 1, week 11, part 2 of our broadcast. Where we left off last, we were doing, we were looking at line of sight, and we were trying to figure out how to fire bullets. We had this bullet spawn mechanism where we can put the bullet spawn position where we want it. This is good. But we're having a problem with collision detection. So, instant ramen and hot chocolate milk? Oh God. It's going in the same spot. Okay, so what we want to do is, first of all, let's get rid of this little debug. So bullet firing is happening, right? It's just that it's going in the wrong direction, so we need to have a direction for it. But first, before we get the direction, we have to modify our bullet script to do that, right? What we want to do is we don't want to have a collision happen. So that's going to happen on the bullet side. So in the bullet controller, what we want is some kind of bullet or a collider filter, right? That's what we want, right? So the only time we want to have to register a collision at all, right? We want to ignore, you know, almost like having a little collision mask kind of thing as well. So how do we do that? How is it that we can register a collision mask with a collider? Well, let's take a look at our options, right? So we're looking at the bullet. Let's look at the bullet prefab. The bullet prefab itself has a bullet collider 2D, and that's a trigger. So that's what's happening right now. The triggers are colliding with each other. And you can see that there is all the contacts that come in down there, right? So we want a collision to, or the collision to be ignored. So how do we do that? Any ideas? Anybody? So remember, we want this to happen for all bullets, not just for this. Or otherwise, what's going to happen is there's two ways we can do this, right? Because the bullet collider is trying to collide with the line of sight collider, right? And this is where, going back to what Russ was saying earlier, we may want to not use the collider in this case. But I mean, there's going to be cases like this where we have, you know, collider colliding with other stuff. We want it to ignore this thing and keep going. We don't want it to collide. Is there a mechanism for this, right? And we know that there's a collider 2D filter, right? We know that there is one, right? So we only want to register collisions with the stuff that's not in our filter. We actually have done that kind of with our line of sight. We've created this contact filter, and the contact filter does it. Now, would it be better to make a new bullet for the platformer, since it would be overly complicated to make an all-purpose bullet? Well, maybe, but it doesn't really matter, right? If we can make a bullet work, it should work all the time for everything, because there's going to be a time where the bullet collides with the player, the bullet collides with another bullet. We need to be able to create that, you know, long term. I agree. We could fix it by making our own bullet, right? Which wouldn't take long, right? We can kind of make it really quickly, but my my concern is we're going to run into the same problem later. So let's take a look before we decide to go that route, Michael. I'm not saying no. We may decide to go there. We want this idea of a layer mask when it comes to collision detection. So let's go into our documentation on the Unity side and see what we've got. So here we've got a contact filter 2D, and the contact filter 2D has a layer mask and a max depth and all this other stuff that we talked about before. What we're really looking for is all of this is happening inside of something called collision 2D, right? Which is collision 2D. We're having a trigger collider happen, right? So we have a contact count, gets the number of contacts for this collision, right? And it has on collision exit, on collision enter, and so on. We have a collider 2D that happens. We want a trigger collider, so we want on trigger enter, on trigger exit. Is there some kind of trigger collider we can use for this kind of thing. So again, I'm just looking at you know, from a collision detection. Physics is usually where all this stuff happens, but collision 2D and collider 2D are the two places we can check. There's also something called collider distance. We don't care about that, but if I look at collision is usually on collision enter on and then we have a collider, right? Collider is the collider that we hit. That's inside of the method itself. So again, we have get contact and get contacts. We've done that before, but we want to be able to do something where we don't want to make the bullet disappear. That's where the thing is happening. We can detect the bullet, but we want to say that depending on what the contact is that we're making, the bullet itself will have a filter, and then it can decide what to do when it collides or not. And what we can do is there's a couple of interesting things we can do. We can change the filter when we create the bullet, or when we can modify the filter of the bullet according to each of the programs that we want to use. All right. So an example would be inside of the collision detection for the bullet. That's inside the bullet controller. Here is where we actually return the bullet, right? We can detect what hits, but we can determine what happens depending on what's going on here. Depending on the contacts we get, right? We want to use, similar to what we did before, we don't have an update. Now this is mono behavior, which is cool. We do have an update method, and in our update method that happens every frame, what we could do is we could say that, well, when we detect a collision on trigger enter or whatever, we can certainly use this, but we can ignore this thing, and we can do the same thing that we did last time with it, which is basically say physics2d dot get contacts. Hey, what contacts are they? Well, we need a filter and so on. So let's set that up in the bullet. We can set up a for all bullets. We're going to say a public contact filter 2D, right? Which we're going to call this contact filter. That's why I introduced this in the first place. And then every frame on update, we're going to see that we're going to have a thing that checks to see what is happening. We're going to make it so that it is going to be on its own method, just because single responsibility principle. We're going to do that in here. Private void. We'll say check collision. And the check collision method will be check bounds, movement, check collision. It's all the same. Doesn't matter when it happens. We'll just check collision. All right. And the collision check method, instead of using on trigger stuff, on trigger enter 2D, we know we're going to have a trigger. But what we can do is, instead of doing this, right, we can ignore this, right? Now, I'm just pointing this out, right? So this is a way of doing it. We can ignore this altogether. And what we can say instead is that when we check collision, we can go that, physics2d dot get contacts. And I want to set up the contact filter. The first thing is going to be the type of collider that I'm looking at. So I need to get a reference to my collider, the collider that's connected to this bullet, which, if you remember correctly, if I'm not wrong, for all the bullets is, I think, a box collider. Let's just make sure. So I'm just going to go back to Unity, and we're going to look at all the bullets. So here's fat bullet. We can see there's a box collider 2D, and there's the regular bullet, which is a box collider 2D, all triggers, as well as the pulsing bullet, which is trigger collider 2D, or box collider 2D. So it's all box collider 2D stuff. So it means we can search for box collider 2D for all the bullets. So we can say get contacts, and we can say that, you can just get it right here. We can say var box collider, just to make it separate, right, is equal to get component. Now, if you want to do this and you want to only do it once, this will do it every single frame. This may not be the best thing for bullets. Every frame you're checking, you're going to get a reference to your box collider. You want to do this one time. So we'll make it public or even private. And we'll call this Box Collider 2D. We'll say Box Collider. And we'll say that in our start function, we'll do this one time. So void start. So we'll say that Box Collider is equal to get component Box Collider 2D. So we get a reference to its own Box Collider. So this collider is what it's looking to see if it's colliding with, which is what we're going to put in there. Okay. First. Second, we need to continue doing the contact filter. So contact filter, we're going to use the contact filter. And then third, it's going to return a list of colliders, a list of things that we've collided with, right? So we're going to say up here, like before, we'll just keep it public so we can see each of the bullets, what they've collided with. Now remember, each bullet is going to have a collision list, right? So a list of potential collisions. We could do that. Yeah, that's fine. Not really the most effective thing, but we can decide to hone this later. All right, and this one is going to be the colliders list. So all the stuff that it collides with. Maybe it collides more than one thing. So that's what this is going to do. It's going to say basically, hey, get contacts for all this stuff, right? And if the when you collide with something, your colliders list, for each collider in your colliders list, in colliders, for each collider, so maybe there's only one, it's okay, probably only going to be one, but for every collider in the colliders list, whatever collider we get, we only want to collide with those things, right? So we want to say that, and we're going to basically just, if there's a collider, if there's actually a collision with any of those colliders, we're just going to set the bullet back to, from before. So we're only going to do this once, right? If there's any contact with something that matches the contact filter is what we're really saying, right? Okay, so if any contact happens with the contact filter, and this, even though it's a for each, there's only going to be the first one that's going to really matter, right? So we got to think about what this means. Actually, it's really collider 0, right? Because there's only, even though it's a list of colliders, and that's what it takes, a list of colliders, because you can't do, in this case, you can't do physics2d dot, if I go get contact, notice that there is no option for get contact, only get contacts. So theoretically, what I could do instead of doing a for each is just, I'm only expecting one contact ever, right? As an example, and then we only care about the contact that is that passes through the contact filter anyway, so it'll ignore all the rest of them. So we're going to say that colliders 0, right? The first collider is when it's going to happen. If there's a collider 0, then yeah, we're gonna have a problem. If it has any kind of collision detection whatsoever, if it exists, right? So we can say that if collider 0, as an example, if it exists, and if it's not equal to null, right? So if it's somehow not equal to null, we're going to check that too. Yeah, because we're going to say, what Michael's saying is we should check that the colliders list dot count is greater than 0, because otherwise we might get we'll get an issue with this because we're checking a collider that doesn't exist. So if collider 0 is not equal to null, then what we want to do is reset the bullet, right? Which is kind of what we had down here. Bullet instance, put it back into the pool. This kind of thing. All right, and sure, you're going to say, what? Why would we do this? Why would we check collisions every frame? Well, this is a different way of doing collision detection. I'm not always recommending it, but I'm just trying something different from in our case, so we can do what we want to do and not do a lot of rewriting, right? So now that we've got that, we can check the bullet. And for fat bullets, as an example, I'm just going to go into our contact filter. We definitely want to use triggers. We want to use a layer mask, right? And the layer mask that we're going to look at is for, and again, we can, instead of doing our own bullet, Michael, we can use one of these ones, a fat bullet or enemy or whatever. So we're going to say that we don't care about the player object in this case, because fat bullets, let's suppose, are only for the enemies, so we don't care about the player object. Sorry, we don't care about the player object. We do care about the enemy object, right? And we don't care about anything else, right? Maybe other bullets too, sure. We do care. If it hits one bullet, hits another bullet, then we want them to collide and destroy each other. And the same thing goes with our regular bullet. So here's a regular bullet, so we can do that too. We can say that we care if it hits the enemy, but we don't care about the player or anything else. And we'll use our own bullet. We'll make this regular bullet the one that we're going to use, okay? And then we'll use the other ones, pulsing bullet and fat bullet, we'll use against in the other game. So to go with what you said, Michael. So we'll say that a regular bullet doesn't care about player, but does care about enemy. Doesn't care about enemy, but does care about player and other bullets. Any other bullet that we have. Yes, we have to do trigger and layer mask for all of them. So that's bullet, fat bullet, fat bullet, and pulsing bullet. Pulsing bullet, we'd have to do the same thing. Pulsing bullet, layer mask, use triggers, layer mask, and that's going to say, okay, we don't care about the player, but we do care about the enemy, and we do care about other bullets. So for a pulsing bullet will attack the enemy, right? For fat bullet will attack the player, right now. For regular bullet will also attack the player. So we want only one of these to work. So maybe we'll just make it so that fat bullet is the one that's going to attack the player, and the rest only attack the enemies. Okay, so that's we make sure that those are set, because you want one of them to be set as proper. Okay. Now the big test. What we want is for it to go back to the other game and see if it's still working, right? So that way we didn't break anything. And it's a good test too. So save, go back to the scene, go back to main, and run it and see what happens. Does it even collide? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Right? No, it didn't work, right? So again, these are things to consider, right? Like what's happening here, and you know, what happened to my bullets? Yours do? Awesome. Maybe I made a mistake. I don't know. Let's also check to see what my game controller has. I have regular bullets. You know, as an example, maybe I want to use my fat bullet or my pulsing bullet. So let's try that. Let's try pulsing bullet, not random, pulsing. Pulsing bullet should definitely hit, because that's made to hit the enemy, right? But nothing happens. So what's going on? Let's see what these bullets look like. So bullets. These are all pulsing bullets. The use triggers, use layer mask, mixed. It likes the enemy and other bullets, but not the player or anything else, right? So this is looking like it's okay for me. It's the same code, Russ, and it works. Pretty sure. Okay. How about anyone else? Anyone else get it to go? Because otherwise this is no good, right? Now, so all I've done is in the bullet controller, I'm checking collisions, right? I'm going to see if the count is greater than 0. And also this is for each bullet. So if I run it again, and I can pause it, So let's go back to the scene. I want to look at this bullet. And for this pulsing bullet, what is my contacts? So this is contacts, and let's see what else. Did we miss anything? So the bullet controller, the contact, the damage, the colliders are 0, right? And there. Okay, let's take a look at this one, which is this one and this one. So these are 2 bullets. These are enemies, right? Let's make sure these are enemies. Oh. That's a problem. The enemies are tagged as enemies, but they're not layered as enemies. Okay, so that's the problem. Well, I just want to make sure that what the problem is, right? So these 3 things, actually the best thing to do is they're prefabs, so just hit 1, go to enemy, and then save it. So we'll say save, override the prefab, apply to all, and try it again. We should have collision now. This is good. This is what I was expecting. Thank you, Russ. So you made it seem that it was good. And let's also change to see if it's the other kind of bullet. So again, if we go to game controller, and we can go to the regular bullets should do the same thing, but the fat bullet should be avoiding altogether. So regular bullets, yes, there's collisions, but not fat bullets. So fat bullets, it would pass right through. Right through. We don't care. And that's really cool in terms of a way we can avoid, you know, kind of the enemy. So now fat bullets is what we want to use when it comes to our other games. So going to platformer, and if I want to go to my game controller, instead of random, which is a bullet type, let's use fat bullets. So fat bullets are going to avoid the enemy and hit the player. All right, let's see how that works. So let's go to the player, bring the player closer to the enemy. Oops. Bring the player closer to the enemy. Put him on the other side there and zoom in. And let's see if the action happens where the bullets fire up, right? Or if they're being targeted some other way. That's really weird. Let's see what my my player. Do I still have the player set, the opossum set to 60? I do. Let's make it so it's 0, right? Or 10. Only 1 again. Okay, so that's weird. Fat bullets avoid the enemy and hit the player. Okay, what the heck? Are my enemies on the right layer? My enemies are on the right layer, tagged, but my player is on the player layer. Yeah, so, and what about the bullets? Let's make sure one more time. If I go with prefabs, fat bullet shows that it ignores the enemy and only cares about other bullets and players. Other bullets and players. Everything else is ignored. So, why? Now the amount of bullets it fires is low. It's really low. Remember, it only fires bullets when it has line of sight. So that may be another issue that we're experiencing that we don't know, right? Because it's trying to fire bullets when it has line of sight, and here's our line of sight. And you can see that it has walls, and the player box is the same. Oh, look at that. See that? Collides with fat bullet. And that's, so it fires 1 bullet, collides with it. Okay. All right. So that's a problem. That's a real problem. The way we did our line of sight is kind of coming up as an issue, right? Because we're saying So fat bullet is actually there in front of us, and it's because of where we put it that it's causing a problem. I don't care about the direction right now. I just want to just test it by putting it up here and see if I get a different result. I should. It's not correct, but don't worry. We will adjust. Should see more of bullets coming out now. And sorry, got to change that back eventually. The opossum should be firing at 10, not at some crazy amount. This is what's happening. And yes, a couple of bullets firing there, and that's good. All right, so let's change this back permanently to 10 so we don't forget that stuff. We'll leave it where it is. Now we're going to target the player. Yes? Just because you're telling me to, Russ, I will do so. So we'll take the player and we'll just save some time. Thank you for that. I don't mind. Camera will go there anyway. So there we go. Okay. Okay, it's kissing the guy and going back. Okay, it's cool. And firing. That's good. I like it. But now instead of firing up in the air, we want to fire at the player. We want to get the player's direction and how we have to change the bullet trajectory. So right now the bullet is locked into a vertical trajectory. That doesn't make any sense for us. Instead, what we want is for the bullet to target the player. So we have to make that mechanism happen inside of the bullet firing script. Yes, it will, but let's see what happens. Because it goes down to the layer, and I have to. There's also something else we can do under the project settings. Under project settings. One thing you could do is if you go to physics 2D, there's all this, right? So what you could basically say is that we could put our line of sight on its own layer, right? And then basically have the bullet ignore it, right? So completely. This is another way of doing it. It's fixed. This is kind of a fix. I don't like using this table unless I absolutely have to. This is to me, kind of an outside the box kind of thing. So if I need to do this, I will. I need to do it now because I don't want to have a problem. So what I'm going to do is in line of sight, this thing, I'm going to change from this layer just inside the opossum, but this layer here, I want to change it from enemy to its own layer. So we're just going to call it the line of sight layer. All right. We could also, actually, this is called the AI layer. There might be other ones, right? Because we don't want to have something. It could also be the UI layer because it is kind of a UI for us. That's what it is. And what I'm going to do is in the line of sight itself, I'm going to go here and go AI, right? So AI, including everything else. Just this part is AI, the rest is enemy. Now that we have AI here, we can say, well, AI and AI, they see each other, but we don't want to do that. And we don't want AI and bullets to see each other. Bullets and AI, we want them to ignore, all right? And bullets and bullets are okay. AI and AI is not okay. Bullet and AI in any way is bad. So we kind of take that out of the equation. And that should alleviate this problem we've been having by putting this in place. So let's see if that's the case. We should see a bunch of bullets firing now, like normal. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of what we expected to do because, you know what? Now it doesn't matter, and it's going from their face. So that's going to be around the line of sight problem. So again, what I went with that is I went to Edit, I went to Project Settings, and I changed under Physics 2D what collides with what. I don't like doing this. I like using a layer mask and all that stuff before. A little better. All right. Notice it says Layer Collision Matrix that you can kind of turn on and off. I prefer not to do it this way. Okay. But you got to do what you got to do. All right. Anyway, so the next part is let's get the distance, so the direction. So right now the bullets themselves, if you look at the bullet manager script or the bullet controller script, the bullets themselves, when they instantiate, right, they have the move goes to a vertical speed, right, every single time, and this shouldn't be the case. Instead, what we should have is a direction vector. So we're going to have a public direction vector. We're going to create public vector. We'll say make it a vector 3. Call it direction. I think it has to be a vector 3. And the we're going to sub this in. So we're going to say that we're going to sub in the vector 3, so direction, right, and multiply by vertical speed. For now, we'll leave it at vertical speed. It's not really vertical speed, but we'll leave it times that delta time, right? So direction is where we want it to go. And what I want by default direction to be in start, we'll set direction to equal to vector 3 dot up by default. So by default, this shouldn't change anything. Let's see if this is true, because this is the default direction that we're going to get. Okay. And if we play the game again, we should see the same thing happening. It should just go up with no changes. Right? And let's get rid of that little thing here. I don't want to see where that is. Where is it trying to fire the bullet? Go to definition. Go to definition. Yeah, and we have to make some changes in there in a sec. Okay, so cool. So where is that? Unity engine log. Where is that trying to fire a bullet thing? Trying to fire. I just want to see that log anymore. But anyways, I think it's in opossum behavior, but who knows? Yeah, I'll look at it later. I can't spot it. But this get bullet, this fire bullet, so get bullet itself, so bullet controller, what it does, it moves and it's the same direction. So nothing changed there when we did this. Direction times vertical speed. What I want is when we instantiate, now I can get rid of all this because it's not required anymore, right? Old script, here's new script. When we instantiate instead, what I want is for the bullet to go in the direction. We have to set the direction somehow and in some way. So when we instantiate, or when we get it from the bullet manager says, hey, get a bullet, right? And what we need in the bullet manager is to get a reference to the bullet itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to say when you get a bullet, new bullet dot get component bullet controller as an example. Now we could also make it so that bullet controller is a thing here, but it's only for this bullet. Dot direction, right, is equal to the direction that we're going to get from, the direction that we're going to get from our instance here, our get bullet file. So this is what we have to change. So vector 3 position and then direction. Okay, this is going to break our code. We're going to have to fix this in a second. So vector 3 position and direction. The direction is going to be set in here, and it's going to be done on when we get the bullet itself. In this case, what we want is to fix player controller, which is where the biggest break is right now. So player controller is going to be in the get bullet function, is going to be vector 3 dot up, because that's not going to change. So we're going to fire the bullet up. And this control, this extra little bit of control to the get bullet function, will allow us the bullet to fire in any direction we want. Okay? Theoretically. So that's the first part. Where we're firing, we didn't break this part. And now inside of opossum behavior, this is the next break. Opossum behavior says, hey, get bullet spawn position. This is where it's going. And then this is where it's coming from. Well, where is it going? We need a direction. And the direction has to be the direction of the player. So we'll say something like, we need to get a reference to the player, wherever the player is, right? we need to get a reference to them. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to do a we can't do it once. We're going to do it every single time we target. We're going to target the player. So we're going to say var, we're going to say player direction, right? Or we're going to say actually player position, if you really will. Want to say that, player position, because that's what we need. Player position is equal to game object dot find object of type and it's going to be player behavior. Okay, so that is the object dot transform dot position. That's what we want. So this is going to get us our player's position, right? And that's the direction we want to go in, right? But we want to put in the direction as an example as a normalized version of the direction is what we want, not the entire vector, because that would be bad. So what we want to do is we want to say something like, var firing direction, or angle of attack, call it whatever you want, is equal to the player position minus the bullet spawn position, right? So that is going to basically create a vector, a magnitude between the two. It's going to take this one, subtract this one, get it, and give us a firing direction. But what we want is a normalized value. So we're going to use vector 3.normalize, right? Which takes this and normalizes it back to a 0. It kind of brings it down to a magnitude of 1, which is what we want. That's the direction. And we're going to sub that in here. Call it firing direction or whatever you want to call it. So bullet spawn position to firing direction. That's what we're going to give the bullet every single time. Does that make sense? Now, in terms of efficiency, every single time we fire the bullet, we're going to have to get a reference to the player, right? The player's position. But we don't have to do this part every single time. The player itself, we can get a reference to the player, but the transform position is going to change every single time. Right, so what we need to do is do this once, and that can be done up here. So we can say that we'll make this public for now. Game object player, and we'll get the player here, right? So the opossum will find the player in the game. Player is going to be equal to all of this once. We don't want this to happen too many times, right? Only one time, because efficiency-wise, especially in mobile, that would be bad, right? So, okay, why is this not working now? So player, game object, we want to make it so it's player behavior. Thank you. Yay! And now, when we get the player behavior, we found the thing with player behavior. But what we want to do is we want to, if I put the player down here, so player.transform, that's not, is that going to work still? Or is that, should I put player.gameObject? I think that might work. Let's see what happens. So this only happens, this will change every single time. The player transform position, we'll pull that information. That's the changing part. This part's the same, right? And then this is the normalization part. The normalization has to happen because we get a magnitude if we subtract one from the other. We did this in our AI class, or did we do it in physics? I can't remember when we were together. All right, so yeah, we get the firing direction, blah, 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 and whatever, and let's see if that makes any sense when we do it this way. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Okay. fired straight up. What happened? So I want to print that out. So what is that thing? So firing direction. I want to get I want to see the normalized values. So I'm going to go public. Sorry, debug.log firing direction. .toString. I think you don't need that, but let's see what happens. And give it to me. -1, -0.1, -1, 0.2. Yeah, that looks right. -1 is X to the left. 0.2 is up, right? So it gives me the direction that I'm going in, right? Why is there a Z component? Well, there's going to be. Right, because, oh, whoa, that, what? How did that work that time? I didn't do anything different. Look at that. That is good. That suddenly magically worked on its own. Oh, I think I know why. Because I set the bullets up originally, right, with thing. Let's see if I can move out of there. If he fires at me, did they follow me? That was weird. Well, because it's trying to follow me, this is going to be trying to get the last position, right? So 2 of them got me. Oh, that's funny too. Oh, it's somehow fired at me anyway? That was the problem. Okay, boom, 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 it's trying to eat me. Spinning, spinning, spinning. But it suddenly started to work. So notice that it just... But it kind of follows a weird track. It's like almost like pathfinding in some ways. As I move. Okay, that was good. And let's see if it can... So it kind of... Yeah, I'm not grounded there because I don't have that. It's trying to fire at me too. Yeah, I just don't... It's really weird the way it fires. It's like as he moves, he fires his bullets. And I need to have an angle. So if my maximum, there must be a maximum angle for a fire direction. So the fire direction gives me like, it's going to move in the direction that I set it. So this is too good, right? Because it's like, it's firing exactly, tracking me 100%. And if I'm close enough, I'm going to get hit. No matter what, right? Because what's happening is every time I fire the bullet, I get a bullet, I normalize, and I re-target where the player is, not where the player was, as an example, right? So I should be firing in the last known location of the player based on has line of sight, right? So I have line of sight. I see the player, right? An example, when I get line of sight, as soon as I see the player, that's when I should set up this player position stuff. So player position, we may want to think about this as something that is done here, right? So every time I have line of sight, the player position updates to the new position that the last time I locked on the player, right? As an example. Okay, we're not going to do that now. That's an optimization. Let's think about why these things started off the way they did. So starting off, they went straight up, right? Like so, right? To start off, they go up, 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 up. And why is that? Because inside of the queue, so when the bullets get created, as an example, they get created and put into the queue, right? They get created with the queue, but minimum, by default, all bullets by default start off with the vector 3 up by default, right? So we got to take this away, and let's see if that works. So there's no vector 3 by default. All right, and let's see if that causes a problem. And that's good. And what we want to do is we want to, it's our bullet that we want, right? So what we want is we want to, right now the bullet is straight up. And what we can do is, I mean, we can make it obviously a different shape for the bullet. Right now we're just choosing that shape. I can make another shape for it at another time. But because right now if you look at the bullet shape itself, it's kind of made everything work the way we want. Let's take a look at the textures. And if you look at fat bullet, here's our fat bullet texture. It looks like this, right? And yes, we could make it so that it angles towards the player wherever it's going to go. Based on this up angle, we could find the angle 2 or whatever it's called, and we can angle that bullet, but then it's going to look funny in terms of you know, just kind of how it looks now. So it's better if we use a different kind of bullet altogether or compress it or something. So let's just make another one, which is kind of what Michael was saying before. So I'm going to make a brand new bullet. I'm going to copy this one, right? But I'm going to make it so that it's like completely round, if you will, right? So let's just make it round here. So round, ellipse tool, and we'll make it so that it's completely roundish. There we go. And we'll save this as another thing altogether. We will get rid of, we'll make it so that there's a border. Make it a red border, and inside the bullet will be, I don't know, some kind of make it so it's an orange inside, orange border with some kind of red inside. No, be a black border, sure, or a yellow border. Yeah, okay, that's good enough. And so it's gonna be a fat bullet. Oh yeah. Fat bullet, all right. And then so what we can do is we can take this and delete it. So get rid of this layer altogether. So why did I do this? Because I can use the same size approximately, and I'll change this to file, save as, and I'll change this to, instead of fat bullet, it'll go in the same spot as our lab. We'll change this to something else. Call it, I don't know, spit. We'll call it another bullet. We'll call it red bullet. Red bullet for now. There's our red bullet, and that's cool. What I want to do with the red bullet, which is right here, which is pretty big, we'll make it so that it is 16. Yeah, it's going to be up on GitHub for sure. So 16, I'm going to apply it. And what I want to do is I want to, for my fat bullet instead, and I'm going to do that just now. Later on, again, we're going to make it work. Later on, we're going to change it to whatever. But I want my fat bullet to have, my sprite is going to be the red bullet. That's all I'm doing. Just switching sprites. So there's the fat bullet. All right, so that's cool, and let's see how that looks. It'll look different, and it'll save us a lot of anger, and it's way too big. It's massive. All right, let's do, well, because I made it twice as big, right? So yeah, let's go back to that texture. Where's that texture? Textures, red bullet, and let's go, instead of 16, we'll go 32. I know, the power of the sun. Wonderful. I love it. All right. He's spitting at me. Okay, spitting. Maybe even that's too big. Let's go 64. Maybe this is one that we can go back to 100. All right. All I'm doing is I'm having the size. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good size. I think it's spitting. It's a pretty good size. We can change the color. Like if you don't like that color, and if you like him to have blue spit or black spit or some kind of spittles right in there, you can, you know, kind of draw little other things in there, like I don't know, some blue colors, you know, some kind of whatever. Be creative, I guess. And then, yeah, sure. And let's just modify that little thing to look like this. Some kind of weird bullet. Radioactive spit, you know, kind of thing. And let's also no, we won't flatten layers. We won't flatten layers. Yeah, so there you go. There's those bullets on the fly, right? So it kind of looks like he's being hit by these radioactive bullets, right? Sure. All right, so there we go. He's being hit. And can I avoid them? That's the trick. And you see that even I'm going to get hit by one of them no matter what, because of his targeting is pure. No matter what happens, he'll be able to get me into the last position. He's pretty fast. I can also change my bullet speeds or whatever, but for the most part, this is bad. You know, he's pretty fast. All right, so. Oh, he saw me coming, man. He saw me coming. All right, that can be a tough game. So and he's gonna eat me right now because he's right there, and I have no attack. I have no ability to kill him. Oh yeah. So there's some issues here too. Like it doesn't seem to be colliding with the when it collides with something else other than me, it ignores me, right? So we can make it so that particular bullet, and I'm going to stop this for a second. One more thing before we stop for the day, right? In the Resources Prefab's Fat Bullet, we can change the mask, the layer mask, so that it doesn't ignore platforms and walls and ramps, because it shouldn't be able to do that, right? It shouldn't be able to go through platforms, walls, and ramps. They should be absorbed, and that should be able to help us a little bit in terms of how it works. Let's try that out. And then we'll push it onto the device, and then we're good to go for the day. All right, so cool. They're pretty tight. Those bullets are pretty close together. You may want to even do more of a delay. They actually hit each other, like they're actually on each other. So let's do a bit of a delay, a firing delay for the opossum. So right now the opossum firing these 10 will make it like 20, so it's not as bad. It's too much. Yeah, that's better. Only fires one bullet, but that's okay because he's a first level guy. He's not supposed to kill us. That should have fired at us, so that's a little bit too slow. But he spit at us one time. He's kind of an easy guy to avoid now, with only one bullet, although he'll probably eat us alive. And he fires straight up, which is something we shouldn't allow, because there should be a firing arc. So maximum kind of arc. Oh, that was good. He saved up all his bullets to fire at us. All at once, actually. So. And we're going to fly off into oblivion. Okay, good. Again, some issues for sure. But let's push this onto the device. So file, build and run. And let's see it work on the actual device itself. I think this is a good spot to stop. But we've accomplished our goal, which is, here's how it goes. So one, we can detect, the enemy can detect the player, right? When the enemy detects a player, they can fire a bullet in the player's direction, okay? We're using the same structures that we've used before in the past, which are, we've got our bullet factory, we've got a bullet manager, and we've got a bullet pool. So we're using all those same optimization structures so that we're able to do those kind of things. This is a good thing, okay? At the same time, we've created a way of the enemy detecting the player, line of sight, so that they'll shoot only when they can see the player, right? Once they've detected the player, they shouldn't be able to shoot into the sky like they can right now. This needs to be a little bit of optimization. We'll do that next week. And you can see that now we should be able to see the bullets kind of coming at us and see if they actually work. One thing, remember, it works locally. Another thing to work on the device. Now, why isn't it firing on the device? That's the thing to note, right? It's not working on the device. Oh, there it is. Just the firing time is off, and it's based on the time frame, the frame rate, right? So, oh yeah, look at that. That's also a problem because he's just off, and he's going to get eaten by this thing. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go to, again, some definitely like all full of bugs still, but at least we're getting there in terms of you know, what it can do. All right, so again, let's try this out. So we're going to go into on the other side here. It got absorbed by the wall, which is good. Let's see if he can detect me. He can somehow, which is not good. He got angry. He saw me, but he couldn't hit me. And now he's trying to aim at me, and, well, those bullets went off into the wild and hurt me, but now they work. Okay, pretty cool. Again, not perfect. Definitely have room for a lot of improvement, but I think you know, where we're at right now is where we want to be. Okay, so let's save it. And while I'm saving it, I'll put it up on Save Project, and I will exit and put this up on GitHub for you. The texture modification will be up on GitHub as well, and we'll see that in a second. So I'm just going to say git dot git commit -m, and we'll say added enemy firing. Git push. We did more, but you know, this is just a way of, and you can see the red bullet went up to 2. Sure. One sec. I'm just going to launch Unity one more time. All right. So what's left? Next week we need to talk about making our level bigger. We need some kind of health bars. We need some sound effects. We don't have any of that yet. We haven't talked about that, touched it in any way. They should be timed with what's happening here, maybe some background music or something like that. But more or less, we have the beginnings of assets for our level. I know that we spent a lot of detail on enemies and movement and everything else, but this is part of it. To make your game playable, you've got to be able to add these things in, and there's a long way to go. There's so many more things to do in terms of, you know, especially if you're doing it from scratch and you're not borrowing somebody else's controller, like you know, a player controller. This is an important step because we get to understand how things work and how we're going to modify stuff. Now, would it make it easier for me to which script did you want to see, Russ? Would it make it? Which one is it?
Linus LOS.
Sure. I think that's it.
Okay. See, my confusion. I mean, this is not. This is a very bad line of sight system, but
it is.
You fire a bunch. My guy can only fire one because the player is never the last thing he saw.
That's weird.
Because it's on trigger enter. So as soon as this trigger hits something behind the player, which is the entire map behind the player is no longer the collide with object, and therefore it's no longer true. So player is no longer within line of sight. So you only have time to fire one. So I don't know why yours is firing so many.
Well, because I only care about the stuff that, because my contact filter, I think, is the way it works, right? Get contacts, right?
But that only applies to, does the contact filter apply to the on-trigger enter?
Yeah. Oh, I mean this part?
Yeah.
Well, what it does is it sets the collides with what I'm colliding with. That's what this does. That's the only thing.
Protecting the player.
Yes.
It's only if the collides with and the get contact both have the player.
Correct.
But collides with doesn't have the player for more than like 2 frames because it immediately collides with the wall behind him.
Yes, but I think what I did was I filtered the stuff that I'm doing here with my get contact. I mean, it's like we're trying to figure out a way of doing it.
Because mine only fires one because this is almost never true. And even then, it doesn't always fire one.
Oh, okay. Where would you want to look, though? Has line of sight?
Yeah, it has line of sight.
Here.
I have no idea why yours is firing so many.
I also changed on the Unity side. Let's just make sure you have what I have. So on the opossum side, I have in the line of sight area, His layer mask is like that. Walls and player.
I have that.
Okay, good.
But that doesn't apply to the Clyde switch. The Clyde switch is the one that changes stuff.
Correct. Yeah. So, yeah, it seems to work for me. I'm not sure why it doesn't work for you. His simulator works at a faster frame rate than mine, so in the Unity simulator you can see a discrepancy there due to system performance. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, my simulator is really fast, right? So now one thing I did do, maybe I changed my opossum behavior update function to fixed update. Did you have that? Because update will trigger a lot faster, many times more.
Mine fixed update.
You got fixed update? Okay. Line of sight is also fixed update.
Can you just run yours quickly, but look at select the line of sight object? I just want to see what your how fast your collides with odd variable changes.
So here's collides with walls, player box, collider.
Okay, why is yours like not changing at all? Mine changes constantly because he's constantly hitting new ramps and stuff at the size of the box. I'm so confused by that.
I don't know. I didn't do anything different than what I showed you.
Because as soon as it hits the player, it hits the wall behind the player, so Clyde becomes the wall, and then it becomes the ramp behind that, and so on and so forth.
Did you do? Is your collision shape the same as mine?
Yeah, I switched it to the polygon.
That is strange. Because that's what's happening. I mean, all it's doing is once it turns around, collides with is basically just looking at the collider that the trigger collider is colliding with. And the only thing is that we have now you put yours on different layers, right? Like your layer for your platform, your layer for your. We did all that stuff, right? Like last week.
Yeah. They're all
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But you're not. I mean, you can't tell the Clyde not to look at those because you need to know if it's between the player or not. But
yeah, it's not.
Why yours is changing, or yours isn't changing, and mine is changing.
Did you want to try and download my project and see if mine works but yours doesn't? Because if mine works on your machine, right? Then thanks, Michael. Michael's gone. Thanks guys, by the way, remember next week, just while Russ and I are going at it, Russ has to go too, probably. But next week, remember that we're going to have a test. I will release the test early and let you guys know about it, okay? Otherwise, I'm going to stop recording this, guys, and thank you so much. Yes, I will. Thank you, Kat, for reminding me. All right, and...